I never expected today to start like this. The morning sun spilled through the villa's grand windows, glinting off the polished marble floors, and I was sipping my tea, thinking of nothing more complicated than whether to prune the roses later. Then he walked in. My son. His expression calm, but his eyes held that sharp certainty I knew all too well. I want half of this villa, he said, voice steady. Just like that. No preamble, no hesitation. My cup trembled in my hand, and for a moment, all I could hear was the blood pounding in my ears. Half? Half of everything I had built, everything I had sacrificed for? Excuse me? I managed, trying to steady my voice, but the words sounded hollow even to me. I'm serious, he repeated, taking a slow step into the room. Legally, morally, it's mine too. I blinked. My mind raced. He was barely 28, recently married, and now standing here as if he had a right to claim half of my life's work. Do you even know what you're asking? I said finally, trying to keep the tremor out of my tone. This villa, it wasn't just handed to me. It took years, sacrifices, deals, careful planning. You can't just. I know exactly what I'm asking, he interrupted, voice calm but insistent. And I've thought about it long enough. I'm not asking for a favor. I'm asking for what's mine. His words hit like a sudden winter chill. I felt my chest tighten. For years, I'd been proud of him, proud that he was ambitious, decisive, but now that same ambition felt like a blade pointed straight at me. How could he think he was entitled to half of everything? And more importantly, why now, after all these years of nothing but family dinners, small talks, and quiet afternoons like this? I can't just give it to you, I said, my voice rising slightly. This isn't a gift you can unwrap. This villa, it's my life. He took another step, closer this time, as if trying to bridge a gap that had been invisible until now. Life doesn't just belong to you. It never did. Legally, morally, emotionally. I have a right to it too. I stared at him, caught between disbelief and anger. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in as his words echoed off the high ceilings. I could see his determination, the calm in his movements, the careful weight in his voice. It was maddening. He wasn't angry, he wasn't desperate, he was simply certain. You know what? I said finally, trying to regain some composure. You're serious about this. Fine. But you're not getting anything until I check with someone who actually knows the law. Someone who can explain to you why this request is completely impossible. He smirked, just slightly, like he had expected me to say that. Go ahead. But don't be surprised if the answer isn't what you hope. I could feel my hands shaking, gripping the edge of the table. There was a cold knot of fear and frustration in my stomach. I had faced crises before, business crises, financial crises, personal betrayals, but this was different. This was my own flesh and blood, standing in my home, demanding half of the world I had built from scratch. I knew I had to act, and quickly. I couldn't allow this to fester into weeks of arguments or silent resentment. He believed he had rights. I believed I had sacrifices. Somewhere in the middle, truth waited, and I was determined to uncover it. I picked up the phone and dialed the lawyer I had trusted for years, my voice steady even as my heart raced. I need you to come over. Immediately. It's urgent. He answered quickly, voice calm and reassuring. What's the matter? It's my son, I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my words. He's demanding half the villa. I need you to explain why he can't have it. There was a pause, and then the lawyer's tone shifted, subtle but perceptible. Half the villa? That's interesting. I'll be there right away. As I hung up, I looked at him. He was leaning casually against the doorway, arms crossed, watching me with that same quiet confidence. I swallowed hard, knowing that the next few hours, or maybe days, would change everything. The villa, my son, our family, none of it would ever be the same. And deep down, a tiny, unsettling thought crept in: what if he was right? What if he did have some claim, some right I hadn't considered? No. I shook my head. I couldn't let that happen. I had built this life piece by piece, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. And I wouldn't let it slip away without a fight. The tension in the room was almost unbearable. I could feel it thickening with every passing second, every deliberate glance, every unspoken word. The morning sun shone on the marble floor, but it felt cold now, reflecting not warmth but the growing storm between us. He finally spoke, breaking the silence. So, what's the plan? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The plan, I said slowly, is that we wait for the lawyer. He'll tell us exactly what this villa means, legally, and who truly owns it. And until then, I let the words hang in the air, heavy with unspoken warning. He nodded, just slightly, as if agreeing, but I knew better. The game had just begun. And as I watched him, standing there, calm and unwavering, I realized something chilling: this wasn't just about the villa. This was about testing me, about testing boundaries I hadn't even known existed. And I had no idea how far he would go. The next step was clear. The lawyer would come. Papers would be examined. Secrets might surface. And by the time this day ended, nothing would ever feel safe or certain again. But I was ready. I had to be. Because some battles, especially the ones fought at home, were never just about property. They were about pride, love, and the fragile bonds that held a family together. And I wasn't about to let all of that crumble. The lawyer arrived within the hour, his presence calm but authoritative, carrying a leather briefcase that seemed almost too heavy with knowledge. He greeted us politely, nodding to my son with a quiet formality that made the tension in the room feel even sharper. My son, of course, didn't flinch. He stood there, hands in pockets, wearing that same look of certainty I couldn't shake off. "Sit down," I said, gesturing to the chairs around the dining table. My son obeyed, though reluctantly, as if the lawyer's presence was just a minor obstacle to his goal. The lawyer opened his briefcase and started pulling out papers, files, and legal documents that had been meticulously organized. "I understand there's a disagreement regarding ownership of this villa," he said, looking first at me, then at my son. His voice was calm, neutral, almost surgical, as if he were about to perform a delicate operation with words and facts instead of scalpels. "Yes," my son said immediately, leaning forward. "I have a right to half. It's fair. I've contributed indirectly, and legally, it's mine too." The lawyer raised an eyebrow, flipping through a few documents. "I see. Let's start with the deeds, the will, and the relevant contracts. It's important to look at facts rather than feelings in cases like this." I felt a small rush of hope. Finally, someone who could put an end to this mess with reason. The lawyer began laying out the documents on the table, each one labeled and organized. He pointed to the original deed first. "This villa was purchased in your name," he said to me, "with funds entirely from your savings and investments. There is no clause granting your son any ownership rights, either by inheritance or legal transfer. Everything here is registered legally under your name alone." My son frowned, leaning back slightly. "That doesn't mean anything. I've been part of this family, I've helped in ways you don't see. Morally, it's mine too." The lawyer nodded slowly, like he had expected this argument. "Morality is important in families," he said carefully, "but the law does not automatically recognize moral contributions unless formally documented. Now, let's move to the will." He opened a thick folder, and I could see my son's confidence waver just a little. The lawyer began explaining how my will had been drafted years ago, with careful clauses regarding property distribution, ensuring protection for the family and avoiding disputes like the one we were now facing. There is no mention of your son having any claim to the villa, the lawyer continued, glancing at my son's face. In fact, there are explicit conditions that prevent the transfer of any ownership without your consent and formal legal procedures. My son's jaw tightened. I could see the internal struggle, the mental calculation happening behind his eyes. He was processing the weight of the documents, the implications, the walls of legality closing in. Yet he didn't speak immediately, like he was trying to find some loophole or angle that might still work in his favor. The lawyer didn't pause, moving on to the next document, an amendment made a few years ago, carefully noting that the villa, its assets, and all related properties were to remain under my sole ownership unless I explicitly decided otherwise. This amendment, the lawyer said, placing a finger on the paper, was registered with the legal authorities. It is binding. Any claim without your consent would be null and void. This is exactly why these documents exist, to prevent misunderstandings like this. My son's face shifted. The calm certainty he had walked in with was now mingled with something else, hesitation, maybe disbelief. I could see the realization slowly dawning, his carefully built argument, his confidence, his sense of entitlement, all confronted by irrefutable legal proof. I couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and sorrow. Relief, because the truth was on my side. Sorrow, because I could see how much he had expected to win, how much he thought he deserved this, and how deeply disappointed he was now. The lawyer looked at me, then back at my son, and said gently but firmly, "I understand family bonds are complex. But the law is clear. At this moment, you do not have legal ownership of this villa. And no moral argument can override a properly drafted, registered, and legally binding will indeed." The room was silent, except for the rustle of papers and the soft tick of the wall clock. My son opened his mouth, closed it, then stared at the documents like he could make them vanish with sheer will. Finally, he muttered, almost to himself, I didn't know." The lawyer leaned back, closing the folder with a decisive snap. "Now you do. And it's always better to know the truth sooner rather than later." I could see him processing the weight of the revelation. His shoulders slumped slightly, the confident stance he had carried like armor fading. He remained standing, though, not out of defiance, but because I think he wasn't sure what to do next. I felt a strange mixture of triumph and pain. This confrontation had not been easy, and it had revealed more than legal truths. It had uncovered emotions, expectations, and a silent history between us that neither of us had fully expressed. "Do you understand now?" the lawyer asked him gently, seeing that he was still quiet. He nodded, slowly, reluctantly. "Yes. I understand." And just like that, the tension in the room shifted. It didn't vanish completely, there were still feelings to unpack, words unsaid, but the immediate battle over ownership, over half of the villa, had been won. As the lawyer packed his briefcase and prepared to leave, I realized that today had been more than a legal confrontation. It had been a test of patience, wisdom, and endurance, an awakening for my son to realities he had taken for granted. I looked at him, still silent, and said quietly, "This villa is more than bricks and land. It's memories, sacrifices, and responsibility. I hope you understand that now." He nodded again, this time with a flicker of respect, or maybe acknowledgement. And in that brief moment, I knew that although the battle over the villa was settled, the real work, the work of understanding, trust, and family, was just beginning. As the lawyer left, I sank into the armchair by the window, trying to calm the whirlwind of thoughts swirling in my head. The villa was safe, legally untouchable, but the emotional storm was far from over. My son stood across the room, silent, hands in his pockets, staring at the floor as if the tiles themselves held the answers he sought. I couldn't help but remember the early days, decades ago, when this villa was just an empty plot of land. I had scraped together every rupee, negotiated tirelessly with builders, navigated bureaucratic nightmares, all to turn it into a home that could shelter generations. The walls, the floors, the gardens, they weren't just property. They were memories stitched with sweat, late nights, and dreams I had whispered to myself when no one else was listening. And now, my son had thought he could simply claim half of that. I remembered him as a child, running through the unfinished hallways, his small hands touching the bare walls with curiosity and wonder. He had left when the first paint colors went on, insisted on planting the first sapling in the garden, and once, in a fit of mischief, had almost fallen into the fountain we had been building. That innocence seemed so far away now. That little boy had grown into someone who believed entitlement could override effort, that heritage could be demanded rather than earned. I sighed and called him over. He approached hesitantly, still quiet, like a soldier unsure whether the battle was truly over or if the real war was only beginning. "Sit down," I said softly, motioning to the couch opposite me. "We need to talk, really talk, not just about documents and ownership." He hesitated, then obeyed. I studied his face, familiar, yet different. The certainty in his eyes hadn't disappeared entirely, it had shifted into something heavier, perhaps confusion, maybe even a trace of guilt. "I know you think you were wronged," I began carefully. "That this villa should somehow be yours. But I want you to understand what went into it, everything I did, everything we endured as a family to make this home what it is." He nodded, silently listening. I leaned back, letting the memories flow freely, as if speaking them aloud might bridge the growing distance between us. "Your grandfather, he left us almost nothing when he passed. I had to fight to secure a place where we could build a future. I worked nights, weekends, and sometimes skipped meals just to make sure we could keep the villa intact. Every brick here, every tile, every piece of furniture, it carries years of sacrifice, of patience, of planning." He looked up, his eyes softening just slightly. Perhaps for the first time he was seeing beyond the surface, beyond his own assumptions. "You grew up here," I continued, "and you've been part of the family's life, yes. But ownership, inheritance, it's more than presence. It's responsibility, care, and understanding the weight of decisions made before you were even born." He swallowed. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, it was contemplative. I could see the internal struggle, the clash between his expectations and the reality he hadn't known. I didn't think of it that way," he said finally, voice quieter than before. I thought since it's our family, that it belonged to me too." I nodded, understanding. Family doesn't automatically make something yours. Love and heritage are not the same as legal entitlement. But learning to see the bigger picture, that is something only experience can teach. And it's okay to realize that now, rather than later. He leaned back, his arms crossed, not in defiance but in thought. I could see the gears turning, processing not just the legal defeat, but the emotional lesson unfolding before him. We spoke for hours after that, memories and regrets mixing with reflections and realizations. I told him about the struggles of the past, the friends who had betrayed me, the nights I spent worrying if we'd ever have stability. I told him about my dreams for the villa, not as a mere asset, but as a home that would nurture generations. He listened. Truly listened. And for the first time, I felt him beginning to understand that ownership was not just about rights, it was about respect, care, and the patience to honor what came before. By the time the sun began to set, painting the villa's walls with gold and amber, there was a quiet shift in the air. My son's shoulders were less rigid, his expression less guarded. He hadn't completely let go of his expectations, but the raw confidence with which he had demanded half the villa was replaced by something more thoughtful, more measured. And as we sat there, sharing stories and understanding in silence, I realized something crucial. Winning the legal battle was one thing, but guiding him to see the deeper truth of family, legacy, and sacrifice, that was the true challenge. The villa remained mine, yes. But perhaps, in this conversation, a bridge had been built, a bridge of understanding that could carry us through the years to come, stronger and more connected than before. And in that moment, I knew that the real victory wasn't in papers or contracts, it was in hearts, in lessons passed down, and in the fragile, enduring bond of family. The next morning, the villa felt different. The walls, the floors, even the sunlight streaming through the windows seemed quieter, as if the house itself had absorbed the tension from yesterday and now held its breath. I moved through the rooms, checking on small details, but my mind kept returning to my son. He had changed overnight, in subtle ways I couldn't fully define. The arrogance, the certainty, the entitlement, all of it had been tempered, though not entirely erased. I found him in the study, sitting at the old wooden desk that had belonged to my father. He was flipping through a photo album, pausing at pictures of family gatherings, birthdays, and vacations. I watched him quietly, noticing the way he lingered on images of his younger self, his siblings, our parents, and even me in moments of vulnerability. "You're thinking a lot," I said softly, stepping into the room. He looked up, a little startled. "I guess I am." I walked closer and sat across from him. "Yesterday was hard, I know. Not just for you, but for me too. I never wanted this to happen between us. But I needed you to see that this villa, this home, it's not just bricks and land. It's a lifetime of decisions, sacrifices, and memories. You can't simply claim it." He nodded, hesitating. "I know that now. But it still feels like I missed something. I didn't realize how much effort went into it. I thought family meant it was mine too, automatically." "Family is important," I replied, "but respect for what came before you is just as important. You can't inherit understanding. You have to earn it." He leaned back, processing my words. "So, when I said I wanted half, I wasn't just greedy. I didn't know. I really didn't understand. But I see now that it's not that simple." "Yes," I said gently. "It's never that simple. And that's why the lawyer had to step in. Facts, legality, they protect us from mistakes. But emotions, that's a different matter. That's where understanding, patience, and honesty come in." He hesitated, then spoke again, his voice quieter, almost vulnerable. "I feel like I disappointed you." I shook my head. "No. You challenged me, and in doing so, you challenged yourself. That's not disappointing, it's growth. And growth is painful sometimes. But it's necessary. You had the courage to speak your mind, even if it was misguided." He looked at me, and for the first time in years, I felt him truly seeing me, not just as his parent, but as a person who had lived, struggled, and fought for everything around him. "I didn't realize all that you went through. I thought it was easy, that the villa just existed. I didn't know how much work it took, how much sacrifice." "You're learning now," I said. "And that's what matters. Ownership isn't just a legal concept. It's about responsibility, respect, and understanding. You have to see what came before you, appreciate it, and then decide how you'll carry it forward." He nodded slowly, the weight of understanding settling on his shoulders. "I want to do better. Not just because of the villa, but because I want to be the kind of son who truly understands, who respects what you've built, not just demands it." My heart tightened. There was a mixture of pride, relief, and lingering sorrow in his words. "That's all I could ever hope for. You don't have to claim half the villa to prove anything. Showing respect, understanding, and responsibility, that's far more important than ownership." He leaned back, a small, thoughtful smile on his face. "I didn't realize how much this villa represents. It's not just a house, it's our family, our history, our struggles." "I see that now." I watched him, feeling a shift in the air between us. The tension from the previous day hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had transformed. There was a sense of cautious understanding, of tentative reconciliation, that hadn't existed before. "And one more thing," I said, lowering my voice, "life isn't about claiming half of everything. It's about knowing when to stand firm and when to listen. You stood firm yesterday, and that was admirable, but listening, understanding, that's the real test." He nodded, thoughtful. "I understand. And I'll try. I really will." For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this confrontation, painful as it had been, had opened a door. A door for dialogue, for understanding, for growth. A door for us to truly connect as family, beyond ownership, beyond claims, beyond misunderstandings. We sat in silence for a while, letting the weight of the morning settle. The villa, quiet and serene, seemed to breathe with us, as if acknowledging that the storm had passed, at least for now. And I realized something important: the villa was not just mine to protect. It was a place where lessons could be learned, bonds could be strengthened, and understanding could flourish. And perhaps, that was even more valuable than any legal victory. The days that followed were quiet, almost deceptively so. My son moved through the villa with a subdued presence, still carrying traces of frustration but tempered with a new sense of reflection. It was as if the legal documents had settled the immediate battle, but now the emotional aftermath was slowly unfolding, a slower, more subtle confrontation with truth. One afternoon, I found him in the library, surrounded by stacks of books he had never touched before. His fingers traced the spines as if searching for something beyond knowledge, perhaps understanding, perhaps a connection he hadn't grasped before. I cleared my throat softly, not wanting to startle him. "You've changed," I said, sitting down in the chair opposite him. "Yesterday, you were convinced, unwavering. Today, you're quieter, more thoughtful. I can see it in your eyes." He looked up, a faint shadow crossing his expression. "I'm thinking," he admitted, voice low. "I realize there's more to all of this than I thought. Not just the villa, but everything behind it. I didn't see the effort, the struggle. I only saw the outcome, the shiny house, the memories, but not the work it took to create them." I nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and relief. It's not easy to see, especially when you're young. The temptation to claim what seems rightfully yours is strong. But understanding history, effort, and sacrifice, that's something that takes time, and it's not always pleasant. He leaned back, letting out a long sigh. "I guess I thought ownership meant power. That if I had half, I'd have control. But I didn't realize it's not control, it's responsibility. And I wasn't ready for that." "Responsibility is heavier than power," I said quietly. "It's easy to want the title, the ownership, the glory. But the real challenge is carrying what comes with it: maintenance, decisions, consequences, and the unspoken expectations that tie every brick and beam together. You can't just demand it, you have to live it, understand it, honor it." He nodded slowly, absorbing my words. "I see now. And I understand why the lawyer had to step in. I guess. I wanted a shortcut. But there isn't one. You can't shortcut respect, history, or family." "That's right," I said, feeling a warmth in my chest. "The villa, like our family, isn't just about material possessions. It's about connection, legacy, and trust. And trust isn't something that can be handed over on demand. It's built over time, through actions and understanding." He was silent for a moment, then spoke with a vulnerability I hadn't heard before. "I feel foolish. But I also feel grateful. Grateful that you didn't just shut me out, that you gave me a chance to see the truth, even if it was hard to hear." I smiled, a soft, genuine smile that reached my eyes. "That's all I ever wanted, to guide you, not to fight you. Sometimes lessons come wrapped in conflict, but the understanding they bring is worth it." He looked around the room, taking in the library, the villa, the memories embedded in every corner. "I didn't realize how much history is here, not just mine, not just yours, but ours. And I want to honor that. I want to be part of it in the right way, not just take what I think I deserve." I felt a sense of relief wash over me. The immediate threat of conflict had passed, and in its place, a fragile but genuine understanding was emerging. The villa, which had seemed like the center of a battle, was slowly becoming a space of connection and learning, a place where lessons could be passed from one generation to the next. We spent the afternoon walking through the villa, examining old photographs, recounting stories, and sharing memories that had never been voiced aloud. With each step, the tension melted, replaced by a cautious warmth. By evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the villa in shades of gold and rose, I realized that the real victory wasn't in the legal documents or the argument we had won. It was in the dialogue we had begun, the understanding that had taken root, and the silent acknowledgement that family was more than claims, more than ownership. It was about respect, connection, and shared history. And as we stood in the garden, watching the last light of day reflect on the villa's windows, I knew that the path ahead would still have challenges. But for the first time since that shocking morning, I felt a cautious hope that we could navigate them together, stronger, wiser, and more connected than ever before. A week passed, and with each day, the villa's atmosphere shifted subtly. The tension that had gripped the house seemed to have loosened, replaced by a quiet, reflective energy. My son moved through the rooms differently now, not with the commanding stride of entitlement, but with a careful curiosity, a sense of observing and understanding rather than demanding. One afternoon, he called me to the main hall. "I found something," he said, holding a worn, leather-bound folder. He handed it to me, and I recognized it instantly. It was an old set of legal papers I had long forgotten, buried under layers of paperwork and dust. My heart skipped a beat. The lawyer hadn't mentioned these. I opened the folder carefully, scanning the pages. There it was, a hidden clause, buried in the fine print of the original deed, one that had been written decades ago by my father, a man who had always been meticulous about protecting our family assets. The clause stipulated that the villa could only change ownership if explicit consent was given in writing by the current owner. In other words, it was impossible for my son to claim half without my approval. I looked at him, surprised. He didn't say a word, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and apprehension. I didn't know this existed," he admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't either," I said, flipping through the pages again. "It seems your grandfather planned for everything, even disputes like this. He anticipated challenges that might come from within the family." He ran his fingers through his hair, pacing slightly. "So, all my assumptions, my claims, they were wrong. Completely wrong." "Yes," I said gently. "Not because you didn't mean well, but because understanding ownership isn't just about desire. It's about recognizing boundaries, respecting history, and acknowledging responsibilities. This clause exists to prevent conflicts like the one we nearly had." He sat down, leaning forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the papers as if they held the answer to every question he had ever asked. "I feel speechless," he admitted finally. "I came in thinking I knew what was mine, and now I realize how much I didn't know." I walked over and placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's okay to realize that. The important thing is that you do now. Knowledge, understanding, these are far more valuable than any half of a property. You've learned something that will stay with you far longer than ownership ever could." He looked up, a flicker of humility in his eyes. I thought I was being smart, strategic even. But all I did was show how ignorant I was of the past, of sacrifices, of decisions I hadn't been part of. "You've taken the first step toward truly understanding," I said softly. "And that matters more than any claim you could make. The villa isn't just property, it's our family, our history, and our responsibility. Recognizing that is the real lesson here." He nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of my words. The room was silent except for the faint ticking of the wall clock. For the first time, I felt him fully present, fully aware of the magnitude of what he had tried to claim, and the deeper truth he had just uncovered. I don't know what to say," he admitted, voice tinged with both awe and regret. "I thought I had the right to half, and now I see. I had nothing but assumptions." "That's all right," I replied. "What matters is how you respond to the truth. Will you carry it with humility, with understanding, or will you resist it? That choice defines more than property ever could." He took a deep breath, exhaling slowly, and looked around the villa as if seeing it for the first time. "I think I want to understand. I want to respect it, not just claim it. I want to be worthy of being part of this family legacy in the right way." My heart swelled with a mixture of pride and relief. Finally, the storm had passed. The battle over ownership, the confrontation, the tension, it all seemed to converge in this quiet moment of understanding. The villa remained as it had been, silent witness to the unfolding drama, but now it carried a new energy, a sense of resolution, of lessons learned, and of bonds strengthened. And as I watched my son, finally seeing the weight of the villa's legacy, I realized that the real victory wasn't in the documents or the legal clauses. It was in the understanding, the humility, and the emotional growth that had emerged from the confrontation. And for the first time in days, I felt a deep, abiding sense of peace. That evening, as the villa basked in the golden glow of sunset, my son and I found ourselves in the garden, surrounded by the fragrant roses he had once planted as a child. The air was warm, the sky painted in streaks of orange and pink, but an unspoken tension lingered, a residue from days of confrontation, realizations, and revelations. He broke the silence first, his voice low, hesitant. "I know the legal battle is over, the papers prove what I already knew now. But I feel like there's something else we need to address." I tilted my head, curious. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then took a deep breath. "I mean, us. Our relationship. The way I came in demanding half of everything, it wasn't just about the villa. It was about me, and maybe about how I've always felt overlooked, underestimated, or not taken seriously." I felt a pang in my chest. This was deeper than property, it was emotional, a wound that had festered silently beneath the surface for years. "I see," I said softly. "So this wasn't just about bricks and tiles. It was about recognition, about understanding who you are and what you feel?" He nodded, running a hand through his hair. "Yes. I didn't mean to be disrespectful, but I wanted something. I didn't know how to ask for it, so I tried to take it instead." I took a step closer, letting the quiet warmth of the garden surround us. "You don't have to demand or take to be seen. I see you. I hear you. I've always known your strengths, your determination, your heart. But there are ways to communicate these things without conflict. We can work on that, together." He looked at me, eyes glistening slightly. I never thought of it like that. I thought claiming half was enough. But it never was. I see now that I wanted acknowledgement, guidance, maybe even love expressed in ways I hadn't realized I needed. "You have it," I said gently. "Not just because I'm your parent, but because you're part of this family, part of our story. But acknowledgement, understanding, that's earned through dialogue, through listening, through sharing. You've begun that process now." He exhaled, a sound mingling relief and lingering shame. "I feel like I've failed somehow. Like I approached everything the wrong way." "You haven't failed," I corrected firmly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You've learned. And sometimes learning is painful. But it shapes you, strengthens you, and prepares you for moments like this, moments where you can choose to grow rather than resist." He leaned back slightly, letting the words sink in. "I understand. And I want to try to do better. Not just with the villa, but with us. With family." A sense of calm settled over me, heavier than any victory I had ever experienced. The confrontation, the papers, the hidden clauses, they were important, yes. But this emotional reconciliation, this raw honesty, was what truly mattered. We walked slowly through the garden, pausing by the fountain, by the roses, by the old oak tree where he had once tied a swing. Each spot held memories, both painful and joyful, and each became a point of connection between us. "You know," I said quietly, "ownership isn't just about property. It's about responsibility, care, and understanding. And relationships, they work the same way. You can't demand trust or love. You have to nurture them, earn them, and respect them." He nodded, thoughtful. "I think I finally understand. And I want to be someone who nurtures, who earns, who respects, rather than takes." I smiled, a quiet, genuine expression. That's all I could ever hope for. For a long while, we walked in silence, letting the fading sunlight wash over the villa and the garden, letting the air carry away the tension, the misunderstandings, the past conflicts. The villa stood silent around us, witness to the emotional journey we had navigated, once a battleground, now a space of reflection and growth. And I realized something profound: the villa had always been more than walls and land. It had been a teacher, a mirror, a witness to our struggles, our pride, and our love. And through this challenge, it had taught both of us the most important lesson of all, that family, respect, and understanding are far more valuable than any claim, any ownership, any paper. As night fell and the first stars appeared in the sky, I felt a quiet certainty settle in my heart. The confrontation over the villa had ended, yes, but the real victory was here, between us, in the garden, in the lessons learned, in the shared understanding that would guide us forward. For the first time in days, I felt truly at peace. The following days brought a surprising sense of normalcy to the villa. My son moved through the rooms with a new awareness, no longer measuring his surroundings with a sense of entitlement but observing them with curiosity and respect. He even began helping with small chores, repairing a loose railing, organizing old documents, and tending to the garden, actions that spoke louder than words, quietly demonstrating his willingness to take responsibility. One afternoon, as I was reviewing some old financial records in my study, he entered hesitantly, holding a notebook. "I've been going through some of the family accounts," he said, his voice careful. "I wanted to understand not just the villa, but what it took to maintain it, to keep everything running. I thought, maybe I could help." I looked up, surprised by his initiative. "That's unexpected," I admitted, hiding my pride behind a neutral tone. "You don't have to, you know. I've handled these matters for years." "I know," he said, sitting across from me. "But I want to. I want to see what you went through, what sacrifices you made, and maybe learn how to carry it forward. Not just because it's property, but because it's our family." I felt a lump in my throat. This was more than a gesture, it was a recognition, a bridge being built where there had once been only confrontation. "All right," I said softly. "If you're serious, we'll go through it together. But understand, this isn't easy work. It requires patience, attention to detail, and respect for the past while planning for the future." He nodded, opening the notebook and carefully arranging the papers. For hours, we sifted through old ledgers, receipts, contracts, and letters. As I explained the history behind each entry, I could see the understanding growing in his eyes, the same understanding that had eluded him before, now settling like roots in fertile soil. "You see," I said at one point, pointing to a series of transactions from years ago, "every decision here wasn't just about money. It was about creating stability, securing the family's future, and ensuring that the villa remained a home, not just a building. Each number, each investment, each choice, carries a weight, a story." He leaned back, absorbing the gravity of the information. "I had no idea," he admitted. "I thought these were just numbers, just paperwork. But now I see, every line tells a story, every decision mattered. I understand why the villa means so much." For the first time, I noticed a subtle shift in him, not just recognition of the villa's value, but a growing sense of respect and responsibility. He wasn't trying to claim anything anymore, he was trying to understand, to honor the work that had come before him. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the study, he closed the notebook and looked at me with an expression I had rarely seen, genuine humility and quiet determination. "I want to do more than just observe. I want to help, to contribute, to be someone who supports this family and this home. Not for ownership, but because it matters." I nodded, feeling a warmth spread through me. "That's all I've ever wanted, to see you understand, to see you take responsibility, and to see you become part of the legacy in the right way." He smiled faintly, a small, thoughtful smile. "I think I'm ready. Ready to learn, to grow, to be part of this in a meaningful way." The villa, silent witness to so much history and conflict, seemed to breathe with us. Its walls, once shadowed by tension and uncertainty, now carried a quiet warmth, reflecting the shift between father and son. The legal battle had ended, the confrontation resolved, but the true work, the work of understanding, nurturing, and building trust, was just beginning. And as we sat there, surrounded by the quiet hum of the villa, I realized that this moment, this shared effort, was far more valuable than any half of a property. It was the beginning of a deeper connection, a stronger bond, and a shared understanding that could carry us through whatever challenges lay ahead. For the first time in weeks, the villa felt alive in a new way, not just as a home, but as a living testament to growth, responsibility, and the enduring strength of family. A few days later, the villa was quieter than usual, bathed in the soft morning light that streamed through the tall windows. My son and I were in the main hall, reviewing some maintenance plans and discussing upcoming repairs. There was an air of calm focus between us, but beneath it, I sensed the lingering tension of the past weeks, the unspoken questions, the pride bruised by reality, the lessons slowly sinking in. He paused, setting down the blueprint he had been studying. "There's one thing I need to ask," he said, voice careful. "Even after everything, after seeing the documents, understanding the history, and knowing the truth about ownership, why didn't you just shut me out when I demanded half? Why did you let me confront you, make my argument?" I took a deep breath, considering my answer. "Because you needed to learn," I said finally. "Not just about ownership, or property, or legality, but about responsibility, respect, and family." The confrontation wasn't a punishment, it was a lesson. I could have stopped you immediately, but that wouldn't have taught you anything. You needed to face reality, see the consequences, and understand the weight of your assumptions. He looked down, absorbing my words, then back at me with a mixture of respect and humility. "I see that now. I understand why the lawyer's papers were necessary, but I think I learned even more from everything else. From seeing your patience, your calm, the way you handled me even when I was wrong." I nodded, feeling a sense of quiet pride. That's exactly it. Ownership isn't just about what you can claim on paper, it's about what you can handle in your heart and mind. You were given a choice, to demand or to learn. You chose learning, even if it took time to get there. He leaned back, letting the weight of the moment settle. I never realized how much patience it takes to run a home, to protect a legacy, to balance pride and love. I thought it was just about having the keys, having access, having power. But it's so much more. "Exactly," I said, feeling the warmth of understanding between us. "Power without understanding is dangerous. Responsibility without respect is empty. And family is never about taking. It's about giving, about supporting, about nurturing bonds that can't be measured in property or titles." He remained quiet, reflecting on my words. Then, slowly, he reached out and placed his hand on mine. "I want to do better," he said, voice firm but gentle. "Not just with the villa, but with you, with the family. I don't want to repeat my mistakes. I want to contribute, to understand, to be part of this in the right way." I felt a lump in my throat, a mixture of relief, pride, and emotional release. "That's all I could ever hope for," I replied softly. "You've taken the first step toward truly understanding, and that's far more valuable than any half of a property could ever be." We spent the afternoon walking through the villa, inspecting the rooms, discussing renovations, and planning small improvements. Each step, each conversation, each shared decision reinforced the growing bond between us, a bond strengthened not by legal claims, but by trust, understanding, and mutual respect. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the villa, I realized something profound: the confrontation, the documents, the hidden clauses, they were all important. But the real victory was this: my son had learned, had reflected, had grown. And in that growth, a foundation had been laid for the future, one built not on entitlement, but on responsibility, care, and understanding. By the time the stars appeared in the sky, twinkling above the villa's roof, I felt a sense of closure unlike anything I had anticipated. The villa was safe, yes, but more importantly, our family connection had deepened. The lessons had been learned, the confrontation resolved, and a new chapter was beginning, one defined not by conflict, but by growth, understanding, and shared legacy. And as I watched my son, standing beside me in the garden, I knew that the villa would not just remain a home, it would continue to be a testament to patience, resilience, and the enduring power of family. Weeks passed, and the villa settled into a rhythm that felt both familiar and new. My son moved through it with quiet confidence, not the demanding certainty he had once carried, but with a sense of respect and awareness that filled the house with a different kind of energy. The earlier confrontation, which had threatened to fracture our relationship, now seemed like a distant memory, replaced by understanding, collaboration, and a growing bond between us. One afternoon, we were in the kitchen, discussing renovations to the library, when he paused and looked around. "You know," he said, "I never realized how much the villa reflects you, not just as a parent, but as a person. Every detail, every choice, it's a reflection of your patience, your vision, and your sacrifices." I smiled, quietly touched. "It's part of our family, yes, but it's also part of the life I've lived, the struggles I've faced, and the lessons I've learned. And now, it's also part of your journey, if you choose to embrace it that way." He nodded, thoughtful. "I want to. Not just embrace it, but contribute in a meaningful way. I don't want to claim what's mine just because I'm your son. I want to earn my place, understand the responsibility, and be part of this home in a way that honors everything you've done." We spent hours walking through the villa, examining old photographs, revisiting rooms filled with memories, and discussing plans for the future. He asked questions, listened carefully, and offered thoughtful suggestions. It was clear that the lessons of the past weeks had taken root. He was no longer the impulsive, entitled figure who had demanded half of the villa. He was now a young man ready to learn, to understand, and to participate in preserving the family legacy. That evening, as the sun set behind the hills, painting the villa in shades of gold and amber, we sat together in the garden. The roses swayed gently in the breeze, the fountain trickled quietly, and the villa stood serene, a witness to the journey we had navigated. "I feel different," he said softly. "I understand now that ownership isn't about taking. It's about care, responsibility, and respect. And I realize how much I've underestimated that before." "I know," I replied gently. "And that understanding is worth more than any claim to property. You've learned something that will stay with you for the rest of your life, how to balance ambition with respect, desire with responsibility, and family with legacy." He looked at me, a small, genuine smile on his face. "Thank you for not shutting me out, for letting me confront this, even when I was wrong. I see now that the lessons were bigger than the villa itself." I reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. "And that's the most important thing. The villa will always stand as a home, a place of memories, and a symbol of our family. But the real legacy is how we treat each other, how we understand responsibility, and how we carry forward the lessons of the past." For a long moment, we sat in silence, letting the villa, the garden, and the warm evening embrace us. The conflict that had once threatened to divide us now felt like a distant shadow, replaced by a sense of peace, understanding, and connection that neither of us had anticipated. As night fell and stars began to twinkle above, I realized that the villa had served its true purpose, not just as a home, but as a teacher. It had revealed weaknesses, challenged assumptions, and ultimately strengthened the bond between father and son. And in that bond, I found something far more enduring than ownership, far more valuable than property: trust, respect, and love. And in that quiet moment, with the villa standing tall behind us and the night sky stretching endlessly above, I knew that no papers, no arguments, and no demands could ever replace what we had finally learned: that family, understanding, and responsibility were the true inheritance worth protecting.